It's a big week for Arsenal women. A 2-0 defeat in Madrid we covered on last week's podcast, bouncing back in style with a 4-0 win over Liverpool. The big one this coming Wednesday, myself and Izzy will be in the press box at the Emirates, as will managing Madrid's Hridyam Arora, who I spoke to earlier this afternoon. You can hear from him later on in the episode because, of course, it's been some few days for Real Madrid. They beat Barcelona after 18 straight defeats. They beat Barcelona 3-1, which is basically bad news for Arsenal because Real made a load of changes as well. So I think that's probably not been great for every Arsenal fan's morale. But over 20,000 tickets have been sold for the midweek game. And Arsenal, Izzy, they like a comeback. They're not a great European away team, but history tells us that they are a good team when they're coming from behind and when things are on the line. And of course, the Emirates crowd, you can call upon them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen it this season with a comeback with the Bayern Munich fixture, and we were 5-2 down. I know it was slightly lower stakes, but it was still we were trying to top the group, and that's ultimately what's landed us where we are now. And then we managed to win that with the home crowd support, and that was a horrible weather evening. So hopefully tomorrow, if all the stars align, on Wednesday, sorry, if all the stars align, good pitch, good weather, and some good training sessions beforehand, that we'll be able to pull off one of those Arsenal comebacks going into that. But yeah, 2-0 down. It's not a complete disaster, but it could be obviously a lot better. But yeah, fingers crossed it's all gonna go our way.
Yeah, as I said, the Real Madrid perspective we'll get later on in the episode, but it's absolutely mad to me that sort of two of the biggest wins in the club's history. One came in a mud bath with the rain coming down, and then the second one there was a hailstorm at Montjuic as well in that game. So they'd be a great rugby team. They're sort of so acclimatized to those conditions. It's amazing. But it's a lovely, cool, warm evening on Thursday. Lovely pitch, lovely conditions. Let's make Real Madrid as comfortable as possible because clearly they like the foul weather. We're going to talk mostly about the Liverpool game until we hear from Hridyam. And look, 4-0. Arsenal, they're very good at scoring in quick succession. I need to do some proper stats on this when I get a minute, but I feel like the amount of times this season when one goal has turned to two, when they've scored, 2 in 3 minutes, or even sort of 3 in 10, at times, they're very good at punishing teams once they take that early lead. And this was the case again on Saturday. It just felt, those two quick goals, Ford and Little, and Arsenal's press that really meant for quite a comfortable afternoon in the end.
Yeah, I know it was. I was watching it at home with some friends who aren't necessarily football fans, and they thought when the second goal went in that it was still the replay from the first one because it was so soon afterwards. And I honestly couldn't believe it because we'd waited sort of almost half an hour for a goal, and then two came along at once, which was brilliant. And yeah, really good at punishing them. I think as soon as we managed to work out a way to play around Liverpool, that was kind of um, being really good on the wing and getting the players behind the fullbacks to put those crosses in, which is how that first goal sort of came from a cross, and it was really like good to see because we started really well, and Renee said that it was down to two really good training sessions before that were very high level, and then that was kind of what was shown on the pitch in the match, and we've just got to hope that they've had two more good training sessions between them then and now. But yeah, I think we've worked out how to kind of get around those formations when Liverpool started to show cracks in their defense, and we punished them, and I think that's really positive to see because sometimes we struggle to get past those defensive blocks, and to have found a way is good.
This was a really hard team to pick for Rene Slagers with Real Madrid to come on Wednesday, knowing that, however this game went in terms of the WSL, the push for Champions League places, actually Arsenal needed a win. They needed a good performance, to mentally be in the best place to take on Real. Ford and Kelly obviously came on at half time in Spain. They both started. Russo back up front, Mon back in the team, and Mariona alongside Little in midfield. We're big fans of Mariona. Dropping into a deeper role, scores an absolute peach of a goal. Whether Arsenal will do that against Real Madrid, who play quite sort of a congested midfield, with sort of many central midfielders in there, I'll be interested to see. Little obviously comes off injured. You'll be at open training tomorrow to see if she trains. Marnham always seems to sort of bolster up that midfield as well. Was this almost a bit of a correction, if you like, in terms of the team selection from where things went wrong against Real Madrid?
Yeah, I think it was. Starting Alessia in the nine, we had this conversation on the last episode, and that's where her strengths lie. And really good to see Frida Maanum on form because when she is on form and playing well, she makes a real difference to that Arsenal side. And interesting to see Marina a bit deeper, but she's still able to have a massive impact. And as you said, scored that incredible goal. Um, but yeah, I think it was probably Cooney Cross good to have her have a rest on the bench, and I'm sure she'll feature against Madrid. But apart from that, it was a sort of freshened up lineup compared to what we'd seen the week before, and it just felt a little bit more driven and they worked well together. It was nice to see Chloe Kelly start. She added pace on the wing from the first whistle onwards, and Caitlin Ford was also playing really well. She was player of the match. And so yeah, I hope that Slegers makes a good decision going into the next match because that seemed to be a really good 11, and it worked really well as we know 4-0 win.
Caitlin Ford, I think, has really stood up on occasion this season. She just works so hard. Slagers, I spoke to her after about Ford. Firstly, I said, "Who's going to play right back next?" And she sort of laughed it off and then talked about why that decision was made. But she said she described Ford as intense. Said she's always going to react. She's always going to go at her players. She's always going to press. I think the energy she plays with and that aggression and willingness to go forward, she gets other players going as well. So she was really good for us tonight. And the second goal is a prime example. Arsenal were sort of camped around Liverpool's box. Some of the even the deeper lie players, they stood like sort of sprinters at the start of a race because they know Liverpool are going to try and play out from the back, which surprised me a little bit. I thought with their physicality sort of in midfield and up front, they'd maybe go a little bit more direct and then look to win those knockdowns for Smith. But they tried to play through Arsenal's press, but everybody was on board. Everyone knew their jobs, and Ford just worked tirelessly. I mean, the work to win the ball back for the second goal, absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, no, she was really good. She's got such great pace and she always has good footwork and is very good at confusing and upsetting the defenses of other teams. And that was really good to see because she was clearly kind of feeling good that evening and she played really well and was a real asset to the side. Um, I think it was just a classic example of how well we can do when we're in possession all the time. And we were able to play those quick passes through, and kind of every single player on the pitch was involved in some way. The goal that Beth Mead, what was Jasmine Matthews' own goal, but the strike from Beth Mead came from the assist came from Leah Williamson. I think it's just an example of how we are so good when we can play from the back and play that possession football. And Caitlin Ford's a real asset to that kind of structure. Um, but yeah, I think it was, Liverpool didn't have enough of the ball and they couldn't play the football they wanted to, which, as you said, was out from the back. And so we won because we had the possession and we were able to play how we wanted. So that's sort of, I'd say, positive and negative because we need to be better at being able to win when we're not able to play how we want. But yeah, it was a good example of that on the evening.
Do feel for Jasmine Matthews because I feel like it's two own goals that have both come from brilliance from Arsenal, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
she's the defender trying to do her job and get in the way. I went to my brother's game the next day. I think they're under 18s now, and someone's on the other team scored two own goals as well. And the second one was quite spectacular, and luckily he had a laugh about it in the end. But yeah, not easy at all. And I feel like on the scoreline, it makes it look like the headline someone scored two own goals, but actually it was some bits of really good attacking play. A word for Frida Maanum as well, hits both posts. I mean, on another Arsenal are 4 or 5 nil up at half time. She just makes things happen. And I've been going through Susie's pictures, and she's one of the biggest celebrators of goals in the team. She is so passionate. And when Ford's one goes in, Russo, Williamson, Marnham, all in the background, they're celebrating more than Ford is. And I mean, Ford's enjoying herself, but they are screaming in the background. I think they knew how important this game was, the Arsenal players.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially, for the fans who, especially the ones that traveled over to Madrid, and it's just good to give them a good result, firstly. But yeah, I think for the players as well, it's a great kind of bolster of confidence that going into a sort of on paper more difficult fixture and more important, then it's great to have a win under your belt, and especially such a kind of convincing win. As you said, it could have been 5-6-0 with those shots that Hridyam Arora missed, and we were just totally in control of the game. And I think it's really nice for the team and the fans to have a little bit more confidence because we can play like that, and when we play well, we're one of the best sides in Europe. But when it goes badly, it's not great. So I think that no one ever feels good after a loss, and so setting us up for this week, that was a really, really positive result.
Liverpool didn't have a single shot on target. I was doing the player ratings and I
Yeah.
gave Daphne a 7 and I thought, I'm really sorry, but if you're not tested,
Yeah.
I just can't give her any higher. And she wasn't, of course, not a single shot. And you covered Arsenal's FA Cup exit, the 1-0 defeat, with that unlucky own goal for Daphne. And obviously, she missed the Real game due to concussion, missed Everton too. She was back in and a clean sheet. And a lot of that in part to those in front of her because Arsenal kept Olivia Smith very, very quiet.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. I think probably realised how much of a threat she was in the FA Cup game recently, and she ran Katie McCabe ragged in that match. But this time we were able to control her much better, and I think it's a good kind of practice for Wednesday because with the likes of Caicedo, if we did something similar with her, able to kind of keep her from playing her best football, then I think it completely changes the game. And it was same with Olivia Smith. There was a bit of rough and tumble involved with her, but and Katie McCabe as always, and she'll miss the next match. But yeah, I think that she was much less of a threat, and I think once we realised how to neutralise her kind of attacking strengths, then it just completely changed the game for Arsenal and for Liverpool. They were unable to use her as an outlet that they rely on so often. So yeah.
A very cheap booking for McCabe. I'm still and cheap in the way of I'm not sure how the referee's given it. Not from McCabe's part. I said to Jamie Spanger, we were in the media room at half time, and I said I'm getting McCabe off now. I'm not running that risk up against Smith. And then we get back out. Jenna Nicewanger's warming up. I go over to Jamie and do a little celebration because she was going, "Oh, I'm not sure. I think she'll leave McCabe on." And Jamie, we love you, but sometimes it's good to be proven right sometimes. And for me, it was a no-brainer to get nice one run and nice to have a look at her as well. I think she's definitely quick. I spoke to Jackie Oatley last week, who covers a lot of the NWSL, and says the last couple of seasons she's been really strong, and it was a test for her at times. She didn't do everything right, but she's barely had the opportunity to play much football because of how good McCabe has been. But you mentioned that suspension. McCabe's going to miss the Palace game, which I know we said before when she missed West Ham last season, and obviously we lost. We said in the build-up, we said, "Oh, that's a good one for her to miss," in comparison to the games
Mm.
coming up. But this does feel actually nice. Longer slots in. You get another defender on the bench. It's probably the best game she can miss, with all due respect to Crystal Palace.
Yeah, definitely. And it was nice to see Nightingale having some minutes and good ahead of her probably playing on Sunday against Palace. It's nice that she's had a run out and had a go with that team on the pitch. I was listening to her on the Women's Game podcast with Sam Mewis last night actually, and she was just saying how she knows she's not going to be a starter this season, and because of how good the team is, and she says she's always looked up to Katie McCabe and she's really enjoying playing with her, and that she's quite happy sort of sitting on that bench, and she's working really, really hard because she wants to be in a position where she's challenging for that starting 11, and she's kind of putting pressure on those who have been starting ahead of her. And I think that's quite a nice attitude to have because she sort of seems like she's really determined, and she knows she's young and it's her first season and well, first few months even. And yeah, she really wants to challenge for those positions. So it's nice to see her getting some chances. And yeah, I thought she did well.
Yeah, I enjoy Sam Mewis's podcast. I've had that in the bookmark. Well, I've had the one she interviewed her actually last summer, and I've had that in the bookmarks to listen to after she signed. I thought I'd do a bit of further research. I never got round to it, so yeah, I will get to that. And like you say, it's a good attitude. You come in January, one fullback is Katie McCabe, who plays every minute. The other fullback is Emily Fox, who plays every minute. Steph Catley, the only player really challenging Katie McCabe before, has been playing at centre back. You have to be a bit of a realist and know in the long term, taking those adjustments to English football, which Emily Fox made look very easy, but
Yeah.
it's not that easy for everyone. So yeah, just good to see a bit of her, and yeah, we expect that she'd start against Crystal Palace. I'd be surprised if not. We'll touch a bit on Real Madrid then before we come to Hridyam. You're going to be at open training in the press conference tomorrow for the Guna. What are the key decisions then in terms of selection that Rene Slagers has to make? When you look at maybe look at the Liverpool team rather than the first leg team, how similar do you think it will look on Wednesday?
I think it will hopefully look more similar to the Liverpool team than it did the team in Madrid last week, because I think we were all quite surprised when that lineup came out and we were waiting to enter the grounds in Madrid, because it was just sort of it just felt like, Blackstenius and Russo in the 10. It was unrelaxing. I know we didn't know what kind of threat Real Madrid were going to pose, but now we do. They're a bit more of a known quantity, and I think that hopefully that Rene will use that and make an informed decision on the starting 11. She's got to strike a balance between having some effective attacking play, but being able to keep sort of disciplined structure to avoid their counter attack, which was quite ruthless at times. And I think we just can't afford any defensive errors or mistakes in the midfield, like that first goal we conceded, which was quite a cheap one to concede. Obviously, you can put it down to external factors, but yeah. I think it's going to be really important. I'd love to see Russo starting in that nine. She's probably got to be a little bit more, she'll be a bit less, sorry, a bit more ruthless and a bit less kind of humble with it. And she's just got to stay in the kind of widths of the 18-yard box and just be in that box when those crosses come in, because she's such a good finisher when she's in the right place. But I think it was a mistake having her in the 10 in the first half, because it just wasn't effective. So yeah, I'd love to see her start there. And I think Caldente could be really a kind of vital if Madrid don't work her out and keep her out of the game like they did a bit in the last match. And I think she's much better in the 8 or the 10 than she is on the wing. So that would be a good decision. But yeah, midfield as well, which I'm sure, yeah, you can tell us about, because I think you wanted to, yeah, you'd spoken about that before.
Yeah, I'm really interested because I think Mariona and Kim can just about work. I think if you have Marnham in the 10, who you then open up a few more of those triangles in terms of her dropping in and working with the midfield a little better than perhaps Alessia Russo would. How the wingers play is going to be really interesting. Mead, I thought, did well before being taken off in the first leg. She's really made a name for herself as sort of an impact sub. If Kim Little's not fit to start, that's when I'm probably reverting back to Volti and Cooney Cross potentially. But because Mariona and Cooney Cross, I think they played together at City away, and Arsenal just didn't get any control in that game and until Volti came on. So yeah, really interested to see it. And as you say, it's about the fact that Arsenal, the bottom line is they have to score at least 2 goals, but Real Madrid have put 3 past Barcelona. So getting the balance is going to be absolutely crucial. And in all areas of the pitch, we touch on McCabe, and if it's her or Fox keeping Caicedo quiet, and then how you look to work your fullbacks with the wingers. There is so much on the line here, and it's a massive test now of Rene Slagers to basically get Arsenal out of the mess that they made in the first leg, and Real, as I'll come on to with Hridyam, the win over Barcelona shows that actually this against Arsenal wasn't a one-off. This wasn't because they were on their pitch and they got a little bit lucky. This is a team who are in the form of basically their history, their 5-year history or so as a club. It is, this could be a remarkably strong week for Real Madrid, and one that, we talk about them never playing at the Bernabeu before. They reached the semi-finals after beating Barcelona. This could be really, really big for Real as a club, and there's a lot on the line for both teams. We'll just wrap up because with Arsenal season, no domestic trophies. The best in the league we're looking at, realistically after that dreadful refereeing decision. Not saying that Chelsea didn't deserve to win it, but I still cannot believe what I saw yesterday at the Etihad. But we know Arsenal can probably finish no higher than second. How big is Wednesday night purely in terms of the context of the season? Because I think most teams would say semi-final as a minimum. If you're one of Europe's elite, if you're in Arsenal's position, you are putting all of your eggs now into the Champions League basket. It's then Lyon or Bayern Munich. We've said from the start we're on the nicer side of the draw. This is huge for Arsenal's season, and we know Rene Segers will be judged as a manager more next campaign, but there's a lot riding on this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we've said this is the easier side of the draw, and so we need to take advantage of it because, it's luck, but that sort of draw doesn't happen every year. And I think we've really got to kind of seize the opportunity that we've been given to not come up against Chelsea or Barcelona in the run up to the final. That, we've got to really go for it now, and Madrid will be all guns blazing, wanting to win because, I don't think they've ever got to a semi-final before and they have beaten us in the first leg. They'll be just wanting to defend or and score more goals. That they won't be kind of interested in letting Arsenal win at all. Um, and I do think that second in the league and no Champions League semi-final is a disappointing season for a club like Arsenal. Everyone keeps focusing on the history of the club and how we've been the most successful in English football in the past, but that hasn't happened for years now. And I think that it's about time that, something was won on and that we just did a little bit better because it's disappointing. And as you said, it's not Renee's first full season, and it'll be interesting to see when she's given the chance in the summer to kind of develop her own squad, and it'll be yeah, I'll be really interested to see who stays and goes because, I was listening to Ian Wright and he was saying that we've still got 8 players from the Joe Montemurro era, and Chelsea from that same time period have only got 3 or 4. And so they've done the work and they've kind of turned over the players, not saying we want to get rid of everyone, but it will be interesting to see the decisions that Renee makes. But for now, we've really got to put all the eggs into the Champions League basket and try and do our best here because otherwise it's going to be quite a sad way to finish the season, just coming second or even possibly third in the league, and that's just not really good enough for a club like Arsenal, I don't think.
Mm. Well, as I say, over 20,000 tickets sold, still on sale, a big, big night. At the Emirates, we do enjoy a midweek game at the Emirates. Thought the atmosphere was really good as well. Mentioned for the DJ, who cynical of me, wasn't quite sure about. I thought she did really well. Thought she got the tunes right for a sort of early spring evening game. I don't know if that's happening again on Wednesday. Love the massive rainbow banner as well, the Love is Love banner. And I thought Arsenal did a really good job on that front. And Susie got some amazing pictures that I'm working my way through as well. So we'll have a comprehensive Gooner coverage on Wednesday night. You'll hopefully be at Sutton United as well for Palace. And first things first, it's the open training and the press conference tomorrow. We'll hear from Renee and a player. I'm still really hoping they put Mariana up and she can sort of give her fight
Yeah.
about Real Madrid. But whether that's wise in the context of the tie, who knows? But Izzy, where can we find your work tomorrow? Where's best?
I'll be on Twitter tomorrow at Isobel Gilligan, and then hopefully come with a piece on the press conferences on the Gooner afterwards. So yeah, really looking forward to it and hoping to get some good insight from whichever player it is. Would be amazing if it was Mariner, but yeah, not sure it's the right PR decision for this time, maybe. But fingers crossed.
Yeah, perhaps not. Well, I'll leave you then from talking about a former Barcelona player to a Real Madrid journalist. I was on Las Blancas podcast last week, and one of the members of Managing Madrid, Hridyam Arora, who is a good friend of mine at university. So we actually recorded this Zoom call. We're only about a 5 minute walk from each other, but the joys of student housing, we thought we'll do it on Zoom instead. So here's Hridyam and myself earlier this afternoon. Delighted to have Managing Madrid's Hridyam Arora with me on the podcast. Hridyam previewed the first leg. I was then on Las Blancas podcast to look back on Real's 2-0 win over Arsenal women. So it's only right we get Hridyam on again, who will be, like myself and Izzy, in the press box at the Emirates on Wednesday. Hridyam, thanks for joining me. What a week to be a Real Madrid fan of the women's team, because even if Arsenal do turn this game around, this has been some week for Real Madrid, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Firstly, thank you for having me here. It's an honor to make my debut for the podcast here. But yeah, I mean, I think it has been a brilliant week. Obviously, so far it's been probably the best week that the women's team have had because we obviously beat you know Arsenal first and then going away to Barcelona with not the not the starting 11 that you'd think we'd have and still beating them by 2 goals. I think that's just it's been very good so far. Obviously, having going through to the semi-finals would be the icing on the cake and probably would make it definite as the best week of the history of this team so far. But yeah, so far so good, and yeah, it's very it's rarely that I'm it's very rare that I'm happy about, it's how the women's team is doing in these big games because history could tell us that we've struggles, but now it's yeah. I think this week has been brilliant so far. Yeah.
Yeah, so to put it into perspective, a 2-0 win over Arsenal in the first leg and then beating Barcelona for the first time in the club's history. I mean, whatever happens from now, there's obviously been a lot of talk about the pitch, a lot of talk about the treatment of Real Madrid women's team compared to sort of other clubs. And obviously, when you have a club like Arsenal, when they've been leading the way in the women's game for so long, but for a team like Real, they've only been around a few years, and there's this talk about Perez saying, we'll only play at the Bernabeu when you win something. Is this the sort of week, the sort of couple of results that actually you'd hope the people upstairs, the people in power at Real Madrid, see these results at least and maybe take a bit more notice?
Yeah, this is the perfect week to sort of reward these players because they've put in so much effort in this last week, especially with such a bad in such bad weather conditions against Arsenal the first leg. I mean, that pitch. I think I've told you in person as well, and I've tweeted about it since. That pitch is probably the worst I've seen it ever because Madrid's academy team play on that as well. Sometimes Madrid's first team have played there as well, but yeah, it's been really bad to win that game, and then to go to Barcelona again in very bad weather conditions, and then beat them without starting some of our best players. That if that does not reward the women's team with with just a game or two at the Bernabeu, then nothing will. Because I know Perez has said in the past that well, not publicly, but it's been reported that he said that they'll play only when they win a trophy. But I do think winning against Barcelona, against this Barcelona, after 18 attempts, 19 attempts really, 18 lo losses, I
Mm.
think that calls for something, if you get to the semi-final of this competition, of the Champions League, and you don't play at the Bernabeu, then a conversation needs to be had. Like, if it already hasn't been had, then it does need to be had.
And out of all the times to beat Barcelona, it felt like this was not going to be the one. It's sandwiched between these two massive quarter-final games you wrote last week, saying it's the tie that both teams wanted, which is quite interesting. But I spoke to a Spanish journalist after the game, and she said, "Well, the good news for Arsenal is that we've got Barcelona on the weekend." And I hadn't looked ahead, hadn't clocked that fixture, and I said, "Well, that's handy that that's sort of." Getting in the way. And then other people said, well, they're just going to name a change team. They don't care about this game. And the lineup that was put out with some of the players who were dropped probably gave off the impression that the Champions League is still the most important thing. But I guess when you drop players, it gives you some incredible substitutes. And that's what Real found out. Caroline Weir, Linda Caicedo doing their thing. But the amount of changes that were made, nobody saw this coming. 3-1 to Real Madrid at Barcelona. It's just remarkable, this result.
Yeah, honestly, when I saw the lineups, I already wasn't expecting a win or a draw even. I thought this was a written loss because Real Madrid were guaranteed to focus on Arsenal on Wednesday. But yeah, they named a lineup that didn't have two of their best players, three of their best players even, and somehow won. And it wasn't even that they won, but they scored three goals against Barcelona away and actually did not even go behind. Like they took the lead first. Barca came back, scored, and then we scored the brace at the end. I was not expecting it, and yeah, it was just weird, but not in a bad way,
Mm.
obviously. And it's just the fact that the women's team has put so much effort into these games without any result in the past. To finally get this when it was the least expected just sort of feels much better, like much more than a win, I would say. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like that win would be so huge for morale as well, because going against Arsenal, first, like obviously you've beaten Liverpool on the weekend very, very comfortably. I think the tie is nowhere near done, and yeah, but this win would be very, very crucial in terms of morale for the team. Just to say, you know what, if we can beat Barcelona away, maybe we can beat Arsenal away as well, or even get a draw and get through to the semi-finals.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, to put it into context, obviously Arsenal's record against Chelsea is not dissimilar, but that would be like Arsenal changing half the team, going to Stamford Bridge and beating Chelsea 3-1 in between these two games would just be unthinkable. So yeah, a remarkable time for Real to beat Barcelona. Any talk that the title race is still alive? I guess no one's looking beyond Wednesday night, are they? And it's still a lot of work to do, but you never know if this could spark problems for Barcelona. Is there any thought that now Real are back in the race for Liga Rev?
I mean, yeah, I think 4 points behind
Mm,
Barcelona at the moment. You'd expect Barca to win most of their games, if not all of them. But judging by the fact that we just beat them, it just goes to show that anything can happen in football, really. And I do think Madrid, for like, let's put it this way: the only games I see Madrid really, really struggling in, except for the few, like obviously there are a few really good teams, but the ones that are guaranteed losses are probably or were probably against Barcelona in the league.
mm,
One of them has now turned into a win, which obviously in the grand scheme of things might not mean anything if Barca just win all the rest of their games, but just one or two mediocre performances from Barca, and if Madrid could capitalize, maybe it could turn into something that no one expected at the start of the season. I don't really think it's going to happen because I just think Barca are going to run away with it because of how good they are, basically. But if there's any chance of us doing it, it is probably this season.
mm. So Real women's team, less than 5 years old. Even still, the caliber of the player they've been able to attract. There are world-class players in that team. There are plenty who are familiar to Arsenal fans and outstanding for their countries on the world scene as well. It does feel like watching them the last couple of seasons, they probably underperformed in Europe. They had that quarter-final run a couple of years ago, I think it was. And they have caused problems to some of the big teams. You were there at Stamford Bridge earlier this season in the group stage, but it's not a popular manager in Alberto Toril. We've talked about the some of the decisions behind the scenes that's going on around the club. So I guess from your perspective, you're putting a lot of credit down to those individual players, and the work rate in particular is probably what impressed me the most. And sort of embracing the conditions. If we talk about last Tuesday now, embracing maybe what they're up against in terms of their opposition, but also within the club and coming together and potentially going to achieve something quite incredible.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it comes down to individuality, obviously, because that's very important. It's been important not in just in the women's team, but also in the men's team. We've seen that happen. But I think that Toril I'm not the biggest fan of Alberto Toril. He has had games where I have questioned his judgment more than once, but I mean, I guess I have to give some credit to him for setting up the team the way he did against Arsenal, because I think it was, not obvious, but one of the glaring weaknesses of Arsenal is to handle transitions, I guess. Um, and I think that, Madrid soaked up the pressure really well and had Linda Caicedo as the outlet to go up and counterattack so many times. And I think that in some ways, credit to Toril, dare I say. But yeah, and also think that just the fact that they were able to manage in those conditions, in those really bad conditions, shows more about how big, like how grand of a character that the team has, just playing no matter what the surface, because the surface was the same for both teams, but the team who'd win would be the team who would adapt to it really well, and that was Madrid. Maybe on a normal surface that wouldn't happen. Maybe it would. You never know, but it's just, yeah, a credit to Toro to some extent, but obviously so much credit to the team who played, especially Lacroix and Mendes and as centre back, because I think they were phenomenal. I've never seen them play as well as they did. Misa as well, very good saves. The defense and like in general, I think probably the best I've seen them play in these last two games. Toril has set them up in a very deep formation where they have to rely on pace going forward in transitions. But I think, yeah, I do think it was a bit of both, but more towards the individual brilliance than Toril's masterclass, if that makes sense.
Hmm. The feeling amongst Arsenal fans very much that 1-0 in Madrid would have been okay to take back to the Emirates. Rafinha, who I know is a player you really like, comes off the bench, gets a wonderful second goal, and now it's a completely different tie, really. I mean, it seems like a lot of the strengths and Arsenal's weaknesses will probably play out again in the second leg in terms of Arsenal have to chase the game, but we know Real on the counter attack, they have the pace in transitions. I think Arsenal probably dealt well with that against Liverpool. Liverpool, who knocked Arsenal out of the FA Cup, didn't muster a shot on target on Saturday, which shows that Arsenal have been able to maybe adjust some of those problems. But when you have a player like Linda Caicedo, I've said this before, if you're an Emily Fox or Katie McCabe, you can't get quicker in training. There's elements of your game that you can adapt and improve, but some players like her just have attributes that you can't keep a hold on, basically. She is going to be crucial, you feel, on Wednesday night when the ball is turned over because Arsenal have to go for the game. But if Real Madrid score, it really is a completely different mountain to climb.
Yeah, I think Linda Caicedo is brilliant. I think she's the probably the most important piece in the attack for us against Arsenal. Um, yeah, the one thing I would say about the game on Tuesday was that even though Linda didn't have that many touches of the ball, I don't think because Arsenal had the majority of the possession for the most of the game. I think even when Linda got the ball, she was so efficient with it, and she scored obviously. Um, and in the limited touches, she just completely tried to like disrupt the Arsenal defense and Arsenal's momentum, whatever they gained, for however long she was on the pitch. When she was subbed off, I was nervous. I was really nervous. I did not expect her to be subbed off that quickly. I think she was going to play the whole game, I thought. But yeah, I mean, I think the pace is definitely a factor, and it's not just the pace with Caicedo either. I think she's technically one of the best in the world. She's very good with the ball. She's a great dribbler. And the best thing about her is that she performs under pressure. Because when I was at Stamford Bridge in October, I think that when she came on, the game changed for Madrid, even though they lost. Caicedo came on, and she just literally was the X factor. She was doing everything in the attack. She got the ball. She'd make things happen when there was no scope of anything from Real Madrid. And I think that's what separates her from some of the other players that are very quick in Europe. It's just that she knows how important it is for her to perform under pressure for this Real Madrid side. And yeah, she did. She does really well, and she's going to be really important for us on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, and some players who have that speed actually it can be hard to match that up with finishing as well. But also to have that speed on a pitch like that isn't always easy, and I'm sure she'll enjoy the Emirates. Well, look, it's the chance for Real to complete the best week in the club's history for to do something quite special. If the same Real Madrid turns up, where do you see them hurting Arsenal again, and what do Arsenal need to change, you feel, to combat Real and find the Real that have maybe struggled at points this season?
See, that's the thing, because I think that you will see a kind of different Real Madrid, especially with Liverpool's getting injured. I think Madrid will resort back to a double of Toletti and Angeldal, but I think where will drop a further bit back into midfield as well, which would mean they'd start probably at on the right wing, which basically it takes one midfielder out and then puts one forward in.
Hmm.
It could work out for Madrid. It could work out for Arsenal. I think Madrid could be even more threatening in transitions because they'd have one more outlet to go to. But also Arsenal could have one less body to take care of when they're trying to pressure Madrid into making a mistake because they're not going to have that much of defensive stability as they did against Arsenal. Maybe they would because we saw against Barcelona that wasn't a problem,
Hmm.
so it might not be a problem against Arsenal as well. But I guess that's something that Arsenal could potentially try to see because they Madrid wouldn't have the control that they normally would again in a big team because they normally go for four midfielders. Now they wouldn't have to because Dorado, even though she's good, she's still like 17 years old. I think turned 17 on the weekend actually. So yeah, I do think they'll go for three attackers instead of two. and that could change the game for either team, but it just depends on how they handle it.
Mm. Yeah, I think the risk for Madrid is that they sit too deep and they invite Arsenal pressure on almost too much and maybe neglect the strengths they have in attack. Because what I liked about the first leg is the fact they kept committing numbers forward, even as that block sort of dropped deeper and deeper. It meant that every time they did go forward, Arsenal were really up against it. I think midfield is going to be really key. Arsenal went with Mariona and Kim Little in midfield, but I think with Real almost playing that flat four in midfield, who were almost all midfielders, I wonder. I think who plays in the 10 is going to be really, really interesting for Arsenal. I don't think Stina Blackstenius would necessarily start up front again. I think you probably would play a Monim or Mariona in the 10 and then almost dropping in so you've got that midfield free to try and combat Real Madrid. It's going to be a really interesting game. Just finally, Renee Slager's made the point on Saturday. She was asked about the Emirates atmosphere and how it could sort of harm Real Madrid. And I'm just going to pull up the quotes from her here. She said it's going to be huge because I think in Liga F the stadiums and the atmospheres that Real Madrid play in are not the same, so it can be very overwhelming and intimidating. I think for a team to come here. When they see us on the pitch in the red and then with all the fans behind us. So if it can come from all directions to Real Madrid, then I think the fans are definitely a big part of that. Quite a big claim, I think, from Rene Slagers. What do you make of that? Just saying, actually, if anything, these Madrid players are not used to experiencing atmospheres like the Emirates, because you could caveat with the fact that, well, they've just gone to Barcelona and the atmosphere wasn't a problem there.
Yeah, and I think, well, I do see the point that she's trying to make, and I think that Arsenal's support, I think, is very important for them as well, and I think that would play a factor. But I'm just gonna say one thing: Real Madrid have had the best, probably the best week of their small history so far. If there's any more motivate well, if there's any big motivator that they could have, it's this, that they've just beaten Barcelona. They're ahead of Arsenal in the tie. I think the crowd will play a factor, obviously, but as you just said, that was not a problem against Barcelona. Might not be a problem against Arsenal either, but it's yeah, I do think that it's just, the mentality of the players has changed a little bit because they realize how important the situation is.
Hmm.
And I think that even though that atmosphere could change things a bit up at the start, but I do think Madrid have it in them to work hard like they did against Arsenal and Barcelona last week. Anyway, I do think it could still be something in Madrid's favor, even though it's against Arsenal at Arsenal. Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's going to be a huge game. It's going to be very nerve-wracking for, I think, both of us. But yeah, I think Madrid having that form, especially against Barcelona, it would neutralize the impact that the Emirates would have on Arsenal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Arsenal's European away record isn't great, but on the back of that, they are a very good second leg team. They're a very good comeback team. They know, even when it's backs to the walls, and they know what the situation is, they're still able to pull things off, and a lot of that is in front of this Emirates Stadium crowd. They're scoring a lot of goals at the Emirates as well, which is exactly what's needed. It does feel like for Arsenal, a semi-final perhaps gives the season a final flourish, if you like. I think a semi-final you probably take. Probably Lyon by the looks of it. Could still be Bayern Munich. For Real Madrid, there's more than that at stake. I get the feeling. Obviously, beating Barcelona makes this even better. But even had Real lost to Barca, still getting to the semi-final. But for the span of a few days, to make history in these two different occasions, the motivation couldn't be any greater because this is the final chance, basically, to like this could be monumental in the history of Real's women's team. It doesn't have that same thing riding on it for Arsenal, of course. But thinking about this from a Real Madrid perspective, this game just means everything, and you never know what it could lead to if Real can get over the line.
Yeah, it does. I think that every against Barcelona as well, just before the game, every player was talking more about, the game was a big factor, obviously, but they were focused on Arsenal. They wanted to win against Arsenal again. They wanted to get to the semi-finals of the competition. As you said, the motivation has never been greater, and I think that if they get through to that stage, it could ring a bell, up at the at Florentino Perez's office. Maybe he wants to invest more into this team. Maybe he wants to open up the Bernabeu for them in the semi-final, or maybe not in this semi-final, but hopefully next season because they've pushed boundaries. Even though they've had some decisions that I have personally not agreed with in terms of what Toril has done, in terms of like, switching teams up, not giving the players a complete proper run in. I think that's been a factor all season. But even apart from that, if they get to the semi-finals, I think that's a big achievement for Madrid. And if they don't, if the higher ups don't actually, you know, just reward them with something like a Bernabeu appearance or even more Bernabeu appearances than just one. I think that just it just sort of rains the parade, really. I think that I've been vocal about it ever since I started watching
Mm.
Real Madrid. I think that it needs to happen, especially when the conditions of the Alfredo de Stefano are that bad. It definitely needs to happen that they play at the Bernabeu. Winning against Arsenal would would put 1 point in the favor of the women's team once again. So hopefully that happens.
Yeah, and I think every Arsenal fan, every women's football fan wants to see this happen. We want to see every club around the world playing in the best possible stadium with the best possible coach and packing out the stands as well. There's some incredible attendances around in England this weekend. Newcastle v Sunderland in the second tier pulled in more fans than Arsenal against Liverpool. There were 10,000 in the third tier to watch Ipswich Town. Ed Sheeran was in the dressing room after. We want to see this around the world. I've gone to Juventus and to Real Madrid this season, and neither of them, and Bayern Munich as well. Arsenal played in the group stage. None of those teams played at the main stadium, and there's still a lot of work to do there, because there are some world class players on show. Hridyam, I think both of us will have nerves for different reasons in the press box on Wednesday, but looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Freddie.